Welcome to my channel, States of History. Today, I bring you a story that will stay with you long after the last word. It is a story of pain, silence, sacrifice, and a strength that stunned even the toughest of warriors. The desert night was heavy with dust, its silence broken only by the low hum of helicopters moving across the horizon. The forward operating base had just received casualties after an ambush, and the medics rushed into action. Among the injured was a young woman. Her uniform was torn, her face pale, and her lips pressed tightly together, not from fear, but because she could not speak. Her name was never shouted across the radio. Her file carried little detail. To the men around her, she was simply the quiet one. No rank seemed attached to her presence, no history shared among the team. But as she was carried into the dimly lit medical tent, something about her made even the hardened SEALs pause. She had been hit during an operation that spiraled into chaos. Shrapnel tore into her side, and blood seeped through the bandages hastily wrapped by her teammates. Yet she made no sound. No scream, no plea for help, no complaint. Just her steady gaze locked onto the medic crouching beside her. The SEAL medic, a battle-hardened man who had seen more suffering than he cared to remember, felt something shift inside him. He began working quickly, calling for supplies, trying to stop the bleeding. But he couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't an ordinary soldier caught in the wrong place. There was something deeper, something he didn't yet know. As the minutes dragged on, her silence became more haunting. Other soldiers winced, cried out, or groaned under the weight of pain. She lay still, eyes unblinking, as if her will alone was holding her body together. The medic finally leaned down and whispered, "Why don't you cry out? Why don't you let the pain escape?" Her eyes flickered with something that looked almost like apology. She slowly raised a trembling hand and traced letters on the dirt-stained sheet beneath her. 2 words appeared: "Can't speak." The tent grew quiet. Even the air seemed to pause. Wordless, wounded, and still unbroken, the medic continued his work, but he could not shake the question in his mind: who was she? Why was she here, and how had she endured so much without a single sound? Hours later, when the bleeding slowed and her breathing steadied, he finally saw the faintest outline of a tattoo near her wrist. It was small, almost hidden, but unmistakable to anyone who knew. It was the insignia of one of the most elite training programs in the world. His hands froze. He knew then, she had been through something far beyond what most men in uniform could even imagine. This woman, wordless and wounded, had once endured training that broke warriors twice her size. Training so merciless that even SEAL candidates whispered about it with respect. The medic, unable to contain it, finally spoke softly to the men gathered nearby. "Do you even know who she is? She's one of the few to survive that training. The kind that leaves scars deeper than battle ever could." The room shifted. The soldiers who had thought of her as fragile, as another casualty, now looked at her differently. Their eyes softened, then hardened with respect. Memories of that training filled the medic's mind. Long hours underwater with lungs burning for air. Days without sleep, carrying logs across endless sand. Nights of freezing waves pounding against the body, voices screaming to quit, to give in, to surrender. And somehow, she hadn't. Somehow, she had survived all of it, only to now lie silent, unable to speak, but still refusing to yield. The soldiers exchanged glances. None dared to ask questions. None dared to pity her anymore. Over the following days, her recovery became an unspoken testament of willpower. She never uttered a word, she couldn't, but her actions spoke louder than any speech. When nurses tried to assist her, she shook her head and pushed herself upright. When pain gripped her body, she bit down and kept moving. When despair threatened to creep in, she stared at the horizon, eyes filled with something that looked very much like fire. The SEAL medic visited her often. He began leaving her small notes, scribbled on scraps of paper, since words could not pass her lips. She answered with shaky handwriting, brief and direct. But those few words revealed a mind sharper than any blade. He learned that she had chosen silence long before the wound stole her voice. She had endured loss after loss, heartbreak after heartbreak, and still pressed forward. And in the crucible of her training, she had learned a lesson few ever grasped: silence is not weakness. Silence can be strength. One night, under the low hum of generators, the medic sat beside her cot. He whispered, almost to himself, "They'll tell stories about you one day. Not because of what you said, but because of what you never had to say. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Word traveled across the base. The quiet soldier who never spoke, who bore her wounds without a cry, was not just another name on a casualty list. She was living proof of endurance. Soldiers passing by her cot began to pause, some leaving small tokens, dog tags, patches, or simple salutes. Not out of pity, but out of reverence. One young recruit, barely 20, whispered as he looked at her, "If she can survive that, then maybe I can survive this." In her silence, she gave others strength. Weeks later, when she was strong enough to walk, she stood at the edge of the base runway as helicopters prepared for another mission. The SEALs gathered, preparing for departure. And then, one by one, they turned and saluted her. Not because of her rank. Not because of her orders. But because they knew the truth. She had faced the worst pain and never let it break her. She had trained in fire most men could never endure. And even wounded, even wordless, she had given them something no commander's speech ever could, hope. The medic stood behind her, watching the line of salutes stretch across the night. His voice was thick when he finally whispered, "You don't need words. You've already said more than most men do in a lifetime." The helicopter blades roared, sand whipping through the air, but she stood steady, her hand pressed lightly to the scar along her side. And though silence surrounded her, it felt as if the desert itself held its breath in respect. That night, as the stars burned cold above, one truth was clear: she didn't need a voice to leave behind a story. Her life itself was the story. And that story will be remembered. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, States of History, for more real stories that remind us of courage, sacrifice, and the strength of the human spirit.